So you've been dreaming about starting your own podcast, but you're wondering, where the heck do I start? Keep watching. Two things first before we jump into details. Number one, full transparency. This video is for the business owners and passionate hobbyists that record at home, or maybe they're renting a studio and need to supply their own equipment. And number two, this video is for podcasters who are ready to take their podcast seriously, they're ready to level up, and they are fully committed to making a quality podcast. So if this is you, keep watching because I'm going to be sharing some major tips and include a few things that some people forget about when they start a podcast. Number one, and the MVP of your podcast, a microphone. Now, you don't need to break the bank or invest in a fancy mic unless you want to, of course. A simple USB microphone can work wonders, and there are many budget options out there that can deliver great quality. Remember, it's all about your messaging, not the price tag. But there are 3 mics that I recommend. Number 1 is the Samson Q2U, which is this one right here, or the Rode Mic Pro for someone on a budget. If you have more wiggle room within your budget, then I highly recommend the Shure SM7B because that one is magnifique. These 3 mics are dynamic microphones, which means they pick up the sound directly in front of the mic, helping reduce everything else around you. The AC, the echo in the room that makes you sound like you're recording from the toilet. Do not, I repeat, do not buy the Blue Yeti unless you're in a studio style setup or unless you're recording in a room that's very well insulated. The reason for this is because the Yeti mics are condenser mics, which picks up all of the things in the room. I'm talking your AC, the dog walking back and forth in the room that's underneath the desk, your husband walking up and down the stairs because he keeps forgetting what he went up there for. I don't care if your friends are using the Blue Yeti and they sound amazing, just save yourself the time and the headache and get you a cardioid mic like the 3 I mentioned before. In my personal experience, unfortunately, I've worked with many clients who do use the Blue Yeti. Meanwhile, they sound like they're recording in the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Spain because the mic is so dang far from their mouth. You get the point. And don't forget a pop filter. It's like a superhero cape for your microphone that saves you from the big puh and buh sounds. Now, most people will tell you that if you have a laptop and recording software like Zoom, Riverside, StreamYard, Zencastr, that it's enough. And that's true. If you're on a shoestring budget, start there. But remember what I said at the beginning of this video. This video is for podcasters who are ready to take their podcast seriously, they're ready to level up, and they are fully committed to making a quality podcast. So having an audio interface is a surefire way to improve the quality. This is because you can connect your fancy mics directly into your recording setup versus using the USB mics that plug in directly into your computer. Audio interface equals better, crispy sounding audio. Another pro to using an audio interface is it allows you to listen to your own voice and any other sounds coming in through the interface in real time without any noticeable delay, which ultimately helps with the flow of conversation, along with your guests if you are recording in person, but this wouldn't apply if you're doing the remote interviews. Audio interfaces also have built-in preamps that give you full control over your input gain and recording levels. I recommend the Focus Scarlett 2i2 and the Zoom H6 all-black input. And the best part is they're portable, so if you're recording on the go, you can bring it with you. Do make sure you have an XLR connector so that you can plug in the mic directly into the interface. Next, of course, you'll need a computer. Whether it's a PC, Mac, or even a tablet, as long as it can run recording software, you're golden. Most podcasters use recording software like Audacity, Adobe Audition, GarageBand, but you'll open up your DAW or recording software, you'll locate your audio interface, and then you can start recording. If you're not using headphones, what are you doing? Headphones need to be a part of your setup, not only to ensure that you can hear yourself and you sound okay, but to reduce any noise bleed that might be happening when you are interviewing a remote guest. Noise bleed is when you're interviewing a guest and one of you isn't wearing headphones, and so the audio from one person leaks into the other person's microphone, which is ultimately a nightmare in editing. So wear your headphones. Let's talk episode content. Whether you believe it yet or not, people are tuning into your podcast for your unique thoughts, your personality, for you, because they want to listen to you and they resonate with you. Even if there are people out there putting out the same type of content as you. Are you putting out content that you're interested in? Are you answering frequently asked questions that people ask you? Do you have a genuine curiosity for the topic that you are talking about on the podcast? If you're a business, think about what people ask you most about. What problems do they come to you for, and answer those questions. If you're a passionate hobbyist, think about what sparks conversation and curiosity for you, and share that with your audience. The key with your content is to be genuine. When you're your genuine self, number 1, you're never going to burn out. And 2, you'll slowly build a strong community of like-minded people. Now, in order to put out content that you care about and that will attract the right people and so on, You have to plan in advance. No more of this, what are we going to talk about this week? And then hopping on the mic and kind of freestyling whatever comes to mind. I mean, if you can do that, great. But majority of people can't. And planning is okay and should be done to ensure that you're putting out the right content. And by right content, I mean quality content. But if you're like most people who have 10 other things happening in the same day, then planning out your content is going to be the best way to maintain consistency and put out quality content. Whether you're listing bullet points or scripting out every word, putting a plan in place is one way to ensure your podcast not only runs smoother, but you put out consistent quality content. Now, believe it or not, some people just slap some graphics together and call it cover art. Your cover art should be a priority. Not only does this set the tone for your podcast if people just happen to come across you in Apple or Spotify, but if something looks slapped together, don't you think someone's going to think that's what your podcast sounds like? If you're getting ready to launch your podcast from scratch, then you're in a great place for this. If you already have cover art and you want to do a rebrand, or you just want something new that's designed, that's fresh, and fits the podcast the way that it is, ask yourself a couple of questions. What is your podcast about? And do you have branding that you can incorporate into the new look? If graphic design is something you don't have an eye for, maybe consider outsourcing the graphics portion of your podcast. It's definitely worth the investment if it means people are going to click on your content. Think about it. You probably saw the thumbnail to this video and were like, that sounds interesting. Let me click on it. Other important things to consider, lightning round. Number 1, music. Does it fit the vibe of your podcast? Is it too cheesy or does it make you feel a type of way? Keep this in mind when you're finding music on platforms like Audio Jungle or similar. Next, your show description. Write a clear and accurate description of what your podcast is going to be about, what people can expect from you, topics you're going to cover, and when you put out new content. Next is a formal intro and outro. Make sure you have a brief intro and outro before and after every episode. The intro can even be your show description condensed into a conversational summary. The outro needs to have a call to action. Where can they connect with you after? Do you have a website? Do you have resources that you mentioned in the podcast episode that they can go click on? What about a freebie you recently created that you wanted to promote? How about a review of the podcast? Include that in the outro of your podcast and use it for all of time or during a month where you're promoting a certain thing. Next is a podcast host. Your podcast has to live somewhere before it goes to platforms like Apple or Spotify. I recommend Buzzsprout. You can set up an account and then start uploading your episodes there. Next, you have to submit the podcast to Apple and Spotify. This is an important step that cannot be skipped. If you already have a podcast, then chances are you've already done this step. But if you're launching a podcast from scratch, then this is something that needs to be done in order for your podcast to be searchable on all of the podcasting platforms. So here's what you do. Record your first episode or trailer, upload it to your host, then publish it. Like, make sure it's live. Then create an Apple or Spotify account for your podcast and submit the show to both platforms. Wait until it's approved, then check Apple or Spotify to make sure that you're searchable. Then you can start promoting it. For a list of everything you need to launch a podcast, I have a free checklist that you can download. The link is in the description below. I've also included links to the equipment I recommended earlier in this video. I even added a few podcasting tips to uplevel your recording. Thank me later. Phew, that was a lot. But the last thing you need to start a quality podcast, a healthy dose of enthusiasm. Podcast allows you to share your interests, knowledge, your hobbies with the world, and people can hear your excitement through your voice. Remember, you're in their ears. Your energy will be contagious and your listeners will feel it. And there you have it, the essentials to have a quality podcast. Remember, the journey is all about having fun and sharing your story with the world. And hey, it's trial and error. If something's not working, switch it up. It's okay to figure things out as you go. You got this.